We are
Could be dystopian.
Yeah.
So let's get out.
All right. Okay.
Thanks all for coming to the museum across the street from LACMA, also known as the Petersen. My friends will get that joke. This conversation started with this museum about a year ago. Where's Terry? See here? Right in the back row. Terry, the executive director, and I met on another occasion. Somehow the topic of my painting came up. He and Leslie showed up, looked at them in my studio, and said, when the new museum is finished, we'll find a place for him. And I'm delighted to be here tonight and welcome you all to this exhibit. I guarantee it's probably the first time all of you have been to celebrate the art of the freeway. So that in itself is kind of a joy to, because as we crawl through these concrete interchanges, and we rarely think about their beauty, we rarely think about their historical, their contextual, and even their mythological significance. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how it affected me tonight. A little bit of landscape history first. So Southern California in the early 20th century was a land not of Hollywood or of aerospace. It was really a land of agriculture. The ranchos were being broken up and they were being replaced by agriculture. We had lemons and oranges and wheat in the valley. We had a lot of vines, grapes, fruits, etc. growing. In fact, in the decade of the 20s, Los Angeles was the leading cash crop county in the country. LA, right? So this is something I've long been sort of fascinated by. My ancestors on both my father and mother's side came here in the 1880s. Even though they were starting businesses in downtown, they all started ranchos. They had ranch houses. One branch of the family had a dairy in the San Fernando Valley before it was developed. So this sort of sense of the landscape has been in my kind of DNA for a while. When I was a boy, we had a beach house in Laguna, and driving to Laguna meant driving through about 30 miles of the Irvine Company's citrus fields. Many of you my age will remember that. I also have great memories. There's a ranch that still is actually the largest ranch in California called the Tejon. My family used to own a large part of that. And as a boy, we would go there and we would jeep for miles and miles through the vineyards, through the cattle ranch. So there's something really indigenous about this landscape that I've long thought about. And even today, when I drive up PCH North, I like going through the strawberry fields, one of our last vestiges of agriculture. So I've long fantasized about, wouldn't it be interesting to have gone back into the 1920s, met my ancestors, seen the ranch houses, seen their ranchos, seen those vistas, unpopulated, before sort of the suburban sprawl happened. And in some ways, these paintings are perhaps my way of realizing these fantasies. In 1940, the first freeway in the West was built, called the Arroyo Seco. We all know it. Soon after, within a year, the Cahuenga Pass Freeway, now we call it the Hollywood, or the 101, was built. Then the harbor, the Santa Monica. The title of my series, you can see, is Autopia. And to me, there were sort of two derivations for that. One was the Disneyland ride where the cars used to be. That was called Autopia. The second was sort of more direct, which was sort of the idea of a utopia and the automobile. And it turns out Rainer Bonham's fourth ecology was called Autopia. So that was kind of a nice little coincidence. As a teenager, driving from our house in San Marino to a summer job in Santa Monica in my VW, listening to KLS and KRLA. It was like a 25-minute drive, door to door, 25 minutes. Today that's an hour 25 at rush hour. The open road, you know, we've all experienced it. It's hard to experience it in LA, but it's kind of intoxicating, and the sense of that freedom and that paradox that Rainer talks about, I think is sort of imbued in the way I've thought about my art. But I never thought about freeways really as an artistic thing until a happenstance about 5 years ago. For a gift, I was given a ride in a blimp. There's actually a private blimp that you can buy rides in. And at 25 miles an hour, leaning out the window, I was taking aerial photographs, not knowing where it would go. And suddenly, flying over, let's see, where is it? This one. This image right here, I took that one day. That's the harbor. No, it's the Santa Monica Freeway meeting the Harbor Freeway right at Staples. And I like the sort of lines of it, but when you come in at landing speed toward LAX, you don't really get a look at these things, and you certainly can't photograph straight down like you can in this blimp. So I took this photograph, and I worked on it in Photoshop, and I never quite got something I loved. I got these lines, and I sat on it for probably 4 or 5 months, just thinking, well, you know, we'll move on to other things. And then one day I came back and thought, I've got an idea. And after college, or from basically high school through after college, I was painting as an avocation. And then when I started my media career, I lost the studio and I stopped painting. So this was really an inspiration. And so I said, well, what if rather than the freeway interchange populated with all those ugly warehouses and those sort of parking lots and the things that we tend to build next to our freeways, what if I imagined something more mythical? And so I've, in these works, sort of taken the idea of that sort of mythical landscape from the past and put it into this landscape of the present. And to me, these curves feel like sort of a Japanese sumie brush strokes, right? They don't feel engineered as much as they feel like someone just suggesting this curve. And each intersection, I've shot about 30 of them. Tonight, I think we only have about 6 or 7 that are represented. Each one is different. You always think, oh, they have a clover leaf and a this lane. No, they're all engineered differently. So this series started with this photograph in that blimp ride. A few months later, I said, okay, I think I'm on to something. And where's Adam? So the son of a good friend of mine, Adam, was getting his helicopter license. And I said, how about taking me up? And so I plotted out all the sort of cool-looking intersections I thought might be worth photographing. And we spent a day bouncing around Southern California. And if you've ever photographed from an open door in a helicopter, it's not for the faint of heart. Your seatbelt is your life, period. Because you're focusing on the ground, not on how far you're leaning out of a helicopter. But we survived, and the series took new life. For me, these paintings are sort of mythological landscapes, and I like that they sort of recall this agricultural splendor of the past, and this uncrowded vistas that, if you're old enough, you remember, or if you go out far enough outside of LA, you remember. To me, it's sort of freedom meeting beauty, and they conjure up this sort of high-speed cruising while admiring the sort of historical planted landscape that I've talked about. In other ways, they sort of acknowledge my ancestors' historical connection and my own memories of this sort of unspoiled past. And they take these sort of
banal and unsightly freeway interchanges that we all pass through and try and elevate them by looking from an aerial perspective rather than a ground level. And to me, they sort of conjure up a beauty that is hard to imagine when you're on the ground. In some cases, the beauty wasn't quite enough. So I've enhanced many of these images, and for the Where's Waldo crowd, I offer up that there's a few exotic Duesenbergs, a Corvette, a Ferrari, and some extra traffic lanes that didn't exist. So happy to have you try and find them. One of the things that a few people have commented about these paintings, which is a little unique, because they're a blend of photographs and painting, sitting back where you are, you can admire them. That's a nice distance to sort of see the sweeping curves. But when you go up, you can actually see, oh, that's a Ford minivan, that's a diesel truck. You can see detail that certainly I could never paint at that detail level. So in some ways, they're like snapshots of our car era and what's up. And then, as I said, there's a few extra little gifts of cars that weren't actually there. It's really a pleasure for me to be in this fabulous new museum. My dad was a car collector, some of you know this, and he amassed one of the great pre-war and then later muscle car collections. So I was fortunate as a kid to do things like hit 90 miles an hour on the Pasadena freeway in an open Duesenberg, to go with a professional race driver around Riverside Raceway in a Porsche 917K, which is one of the supercars of all times. And I've done my own share of fast things, but I'm not going to brag about those. Anyway, hopefully these paintings can evoke some of the feeling that I have for these landscapes and I have for the cars. And as a special thing tonight, I really want to thank Terry's offered to do a raffle. So any of the cars that you see tonight, we're going to have a little raffle. And just see me later and we'll make sure one of these cars rolls off tonight. So,
special thanks to Terry and Leslie for all their work. Sarah Weber, who's here somewhere, put on this event. There she is, and did a great job. I think this is the first time they've done an event like this right here. I think the space works wonderful, and it's a great honor to be the first one here. I'd also like to thank two other people. Stanley Smith, who was on the balloon, the blimp ride with me. And it was his Hasselblad that I shot the first group of photos with. And he was shooting his own art. He's a great photographer. He has his own work from that same night. It's actually kind of a cool thing. And lastly, my lovely partner, Seth C., whose inspiration to kind of keep working on this series has pushed me for the last 3 years. So thank you much. Anyway, open for questions.